Today we're diving into the concept art for Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, which gives us a cool glimpse into the earlier development of this game, as well as some things that ended up getting cut before release. And before we get going, since there's currently no other major FNAF games in sight, I want to do another poll with you, the community, to see which FNAF games are the most popular, and see if opinions have changed much since I last did it a few years ago. So if you would like to take part, head on over to the link down in the description. Anyways, with all that said, splash that like button below. It's time to find some more FNAF Secret of the Mimic lost bits. Alright, so like I mentioned, there are various bits of concept art and UI mockups that were shared online by some of the artists that worked on Secret of the Mimic. I mentioned some of the UI mockups back in part 2 that were shared by lead UI artist Glenn Letier, but there are a few more that I want to touch on here. First up is an early mockup of the file select screen. At the top right here, it looks like there was planned to be a percentage indicating how much of the game was completed, and instead, in the final cut, this was just changed to indicate if a file had started a New Game Plus run. And also, the bottom of these cards were originally planned to show time worked, or how much game time was spent on a given file. This was ultimately never added to the final version of this menu, and the bottom just remains empty now. Then secondly, one small change can be seen in this mockup of the map screen as it refers to the retail showroom as the costume shop. And interestingly enough, this is still what it's referred to as in the game's files. And while we're talking about the map, left over in the files of the game is this map outline of the first floor. And it actually has a few changes compared to how the map appears in the final cut, with some rooms having a different layout. I'll fade between the two layouts here so you can get a good look at which room layouts were changed. And then last up for the conceptual UI mockups here, there's also this one for the screen used for the crane terminals. Aside from the monitor itself looking a bit different, there's actually a few changes that were made here, most of which I covered in the last video when I chatted about the pre-release build, as the layout in this concept appears to more so resemble what was seen there with the placement of the control UI and the waiting graphic on the bottom left here. But in addition to those, another difference here is actually the inclusion of this single square unit that ended up getting cut from the final version of this loading bay crane puzzle here. Now, moving on to the concept art for this game, there was a bunch shared by the game's artists that give us a really cool look into the early design stage of this game, and some of them even reveal some ideas that never made it to fruition. First up, we got a few documents for conceptualizing Jackie, including various poses, designing her box, and then this document also shows off various images that were used as inspiration or a reference for various parts of Jackie. For example, we have these sequins for Jackie's hat, some wool pom-poms, this plastic or resin figure for the hands, as well as even a Ronald McDonald statue here. I suppose, unsurprisingly, makes an appearance. Next, there's some concept art for Captain Springlock, even showing how a human would fit inside the suit. There's also various design ideas for the Captain's arm cannon, all of which were seemingly passed on. Instead of the more basic one we ended up getting with the octopus on it, here we have one with some spiky bands and a skull and crossbones. Two different designs for one seemingly inspired by submarines, including this one that might have been a reference to a certain Beatles song about a submarine in a certain color in which we all live in apparently, one with an octopus tentacle motif, and then there's this one that's seemingly inspired by pirate treasure. And to add to those, before it was finalized to be an octopus, there are also a few concepts for which animal would be on the captain's shoulder, including a chameleon, a toucan, as well as two differently colored parrots. Next, there's a conceptual mock-up of the player's first-person view from inside Captain Springlock's suit, where this appears to perhaps be a render of some sort of early version of the admin wing of the facility. And it's kinda hard to tell, and I'm not sure if I'm going crazy, but to me, this definitely looks like a model of some mysterious A-posing person here. Kinda creepy, honestly. Next, we have some concept art for the pirate puppet show, including art of the puppets, some of which, like this chipmunk and bird, weren't added in the show. Boxy with and without a pirate costume, art of various props for the show, and then the sketch of the ship stage here seems to show an idea for a day-night switch in the play that didn't get implemented. Next up, we have a document for Nurse Dolly, and I already teased this one in my previous video, as it seems that this concept art of Dolly was used for the silhouette found out of bounds, as well as that one cutout in the workshop area. And here we can also see a concept for how a person would fit inside the nurse costume, which is a bit strange since I thought that these actually were supposed to be robots and not mascot suits worn by people. And then, of course, most interesting on this page, I think, is this alternate design of the nurse. Here, Dolly not only has a differently colored dress and shoes, but also blonde hair instead of black, some lightning bolts on her hand defib panel things, and interestingly, the spelling of her name is different between the two designs here, ending with either Y or IE, meaning that the spelling on this unused alternate design is the one that actually ended up getting chosen. Then after that, we also have some concept art for the nurse after she reaches temperatures higher than she was probably designed for. And here we can see this pretty unsettling art of her back, showing her backpack busted and parts of her hair burnt off, revealing her scalp underneath. Then we have some concept art of Big Top, as well as various different concepts for the admission tickets to the showroom. And then, interestingly enough, the art for the other assets in the Big Top showroom appear to reveal a station that was cut, one involving Mystic Hippo, where the player could have revealed their destiny. Now, there is one room that's sealed off in the showroom, and we explored it in my first video, showing that there's unfortunately nothing behind the closed doors, but I can only assume that this room was at one point planned to have been for this Mystic Hippo station. Next up, we have some concept art for Rocktopus, and here we can actually see a scrapped idea where his drum set would have been made up of a bunch of trash like some garbage cans, plastic buckets, a traffic cone, as well as, of course, some radioactive waste, instead of a more proper kit as he's seen playing in the final version of the Welcome Show. Then related to Rocktopus and the Welcome Show, there are also drawings shared of various ideas for the crank mechanism for moving Rocktopus back to the starting position after the show malfunctions, and most of these appear to be a take on a ship wheel, and ultimately none of these were chosen as it was made into a more basic crank design. Chica is up next, where we can once again see how a human would fit inside the suit, and then in addition to the roller skating cupcake animatronics we see in this game, this concept art also shows several other food fellas. And I think it's super cool that this concept art and these fellas are actually featured in the game, in the office room in the admin wing. Though, although the Burger Buddy is seen on some posters in that room, I believe that's the only one that's missing a cutout here. I think this is a really cool way to reuse concept art in a game that totally makes in-universe sense, and this is actually done on more than one occasion, like with this concept art of the alligator as well, and more. Then I mentioned the placeholder art of the mascots that ended up getting used for some of the cutouts seen in the game in my previous video, but here's another look at all the ones that were shared. And I mentioned this monkey fella, but there's also this wannabe plant boy flower guy here that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall seeing this art used anywhere in the game. Then we got some concept art of the animal decor seen in the secret bedroom in the inventor's house, and we also have an alternate design of the quilt seen on the wall where the animal panels were square and much smaller. And then there are also these hanging flags and banners here, neither of which ended up getting added into this room in the final game. Then next up, there's a document that was shared mostly featuring some artwork from FNAF Security Breach and one featuring regular Freddy. And this actually appears to be concept art that was made for the video announcing Steelwool Studios event at PAX West 2024. And then, what I think is the most mysterious in this set of early concept art is this one for some sort of staging area that fell to complete ruin. Here we can see a power cable or something running in from the adjacent room that would seemingly lead to this lever, a pedestal with a big red button that would presumably activate whatever would be presented on stage here, And then we have some rather creepy looking cardboard cutouts of some animal characters that didn't make it into the final cut of this game. And these include this bird, what I think is a bear, as well as this stubby mouse guy. And then in the top left here, we also have this creepy happy mask that looks pretty unsettling. I guess we kinda got something similar to this in the R&D section towards the end of this game, but I think this artwork here just looks really cool. Now that's about it from what Sabine, the concept artist, had shared, but I think it's also interesting to note that based on the naming of what was uploaded, there appear to be several files that didn't get shared. Now, whether this is because the other documents contain content that Steelwool or Scott Cawthon don't want publicly seen, or they just weren't deemed super interesting or something, is unfortunately just left for us to speculate over. But in addition to the art that was shared by Sabine, there's also a whole bunch that was shared by another artist that worked on the game, Angel Manila. Now, for the most part here, the art is either the same as the objects are seen in the game, or at least they're very similar. But some concept highlights include different ideas for how the audio log players would work, including most of them seemingly being portable rather than wall-mounted as is seen in the game, several different concepts for how the tapes could look, various different designs for the computer terminals with some being taller than the rest here. We got concepts of the conduit puzzles as well as different ideas for how the pieces could look, some different ideas for the game's levers and cranks, there are different designs of the birthday puppy, some more concept art of the pirate captain, who interestingly here is referred to as Captain Cobalt, suggesting that that was originally the planned name for the character. And then there are some very cool concepts for some prototype springlock suits, as well as some for Bub and Monty, with Monty's featuring different designs for his head and hat. And then there's also a document featuring a bunch of different designs for the animatronic abomination known as M2RND. Instead of using the prototype pieces of the animatronics, as it's seen in the final game, the concepts here mostly use parts of the original animatronics as we saw them in FNAF 1. And here we can see various different configurations with different parts in different places, with some of the concepts here honestly looking like pure nightmare fuel. Like this would have been extremely terrifying to see. But ultimately, it looks like the large design here was the one that was chosen, though as you can see, all of the pieces got swapped out with the prototype equivalents. I guess it makes more sense this way given the context of where this is seen in the game, but what do you think? Do you like the prototype designs of M2, or would you have preferred the Abomination to take on more of a FNAF 1 look? Then next, we got a pair of pages featuring several different concepts for the screen and lights on the data diver, as well as different ideas for the connectors. But what I think is extra interesting is that all of these concepts here feature sections on the data diver that never ended up getting added in the final design, where it would seemingly display that a new audio log was available. Now, I've talked about scrapped ideas for the audio logs to be playable outside of just their original players in my last video, and it seems like this supports that idea, where the audio logs would have seemingly have been saved to the data diver to be uploaded to the terminals, or perhaps even playable right from the unit. Oh yeah, and we also talked about some early security clearance icons back in part 2, and here we can again see some seemingly even earlier ones. These are just very basic shapes, so I'm pretty confident that these were just placeholders until the more finalized icons were designed. There's also this page for the data diver storage unit, and in addition to this art being actually what was used for the placeholder model we covered back in part 2, here we can see a concept for how Arnold was to wear the data diver, or maybe still does since we never normally see this, and we can also see the slots on the back of the device which would have been used to attach to the harness. And here we once again see another scrapped idea for a screen showing that an audio log was available, this time on a screen on top of the storage unit. And then last up, Angel also shared some concept environment art of a few different areas. One of an office room, a hallway, a sketch of some sort of costume assembly area, two concepts of a design room of sorts, both of which feature this wall-mounted unicorn head, which actually did end up making its way into the final game, as it's seen in Edwin's office. And then last but not least, there's this concept art of what looks to be the birthday showroom area, which looks quite different than how it appears in the game, as here we can see a stage with a gift box, presumably where Jackie would still have appeared, as well as a split motif between space and a medieval one, as we can see an alien, a rocket ship, as well as a UFO on the left side, and then a castle, a sword and stone, and even a dragon on the right here. And I guess the more medieval style is what ended up getting chosen, though now that I think about it, not really sure how that relates to Jackie. I guess maybe aside from her being a jester or something. Regardless, I don't know about you guys, but I think I prefer the layout and style of what's seen in this concept art here over what we ended up getting for the birthday showroom in the final game. And now, last up for this video, in addition to all of this concept art here and everything I've covered in my previous videos, there's still more unused content I want to touch on. For starters, something I covered back in my first video were the billboard models that were found out of bounds in the driving map that's used in both the game's intro as well as ending. Well, it turns out that there actually was an intended purpose for these, which, according to a blueprint file associated with them, they were once planned to be used for the game's credits, presumably during the ending where Arnold drives away from the facility after giving the data diver to the Mimic. Next, I went over the cut idea to implement the Mystic Hippo section in the Big Top showroom, but it looks like there were two other minigame ideas that were cut as well. Left over in the game's coding are references to a Bonka Bunny minigame, as well as a carousel repair minigame too, both of which aren't seen in this game, but you may remember seeing these in another Steelwool Studios developed FNAF game, FNAF Help Wanted 2. So it seems in addition to the target shooting minigames, which Steelwool seems to really love, the Bonka Bunny and carousel repair minigames were also once planned to be brought back here in Secret of the Mimic in some capacity. But for one reason or another, they just weren't added, and instead we just got two target blasters in this showroom. And speaking of Steelwool Studios, they just can't seem to stop making posts containing unused content, as in addition to the post they made containing the unused room with the equally unused cutout I covered in my last video, they also recently made a post containing various character models, and among these are actually two normally unused models. We have the naked Mr. Helpful model only rocking his bow tie, which I covered in my last video here, and here we can also see this model of Kit, the one puppet from the pirate show, and this appears to be an early model of Kit, where the puppet can be seen wearing a different outfit, a dark green crossbody belt thing instead of the red sash or belt that can be seen in the final model. So yeah, it's kinda odd. And this just has me wondering what other unused content they'll include in their posts next. And then in my last video I mentioned how Hedgehog Hudgy used to be known as Henry, but there's actually yet another name that was considered and scrapped, as the hedgehog is also referred to as Harry in at least one of the files. And lastly, in addition to all of the unused and subtitle-less voice lines I covered in my last video, there's one more kind of funny one I want to touch on here, and it's another one for Nurse Dolly. So one of the lines she says in the game is, "You need a lobotomy." But there's a subtitle string for an alternate version of this line, where instead of her saying you need a lobotomy, she would have said robotomy instead. Now at first I thought this might have been a typo, but the R key is nowhere close to the L key, so this must have been intentional. And I think this would have been pretty funny to hear in the game, and it kinda makes sense I guess, since I believe the nurse is supposed to work on other animatronics. And my friends, that's about it for FNAF Secret of the Mimic, and I hope you enjoyed. Although it wasn't as much unused and unseen content as with Security Breach, as we only got 4 videos out of it, I think it was all still really neat stuff. Of course, a special shout out to all the artists that shared their work with us, as well as to the Technical FNAF Discord for helping out with this video. If you enjoyed this video, check out some of my other lost bits, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to find your way back here in the future. And as always, thank you all so much for stopping by today, and I will see you in a bit.